Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, for another very, very informative show. The topic today, Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. This is going to be a very, very special show. We have two special guests today. Before we introduce them, I would like to let you know that this program, radio show, is being Facebook Live. So I am asking you again, if you haven't followed our page, to look for us. Look for our page at AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. And then once you find the page, follow it and then recommend it to others. This is very, very important to us, as it helps us to know who we are reaching. And this is very, very important. We will have two guests today to talk about the Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. I don't want to tell you the name because it's like revealing the secret, right? So that's why I'm hesitant to give you the name. I really want to make sure that we have her on the line. While Ulysses calls our guest, let me introduce the one that is here in the studio, Steve Jennings. Steve Jennings, thank you again for making time to be with us. This is a very, very important topic. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Perfect. How do you feel about us addressing this topic?
I think it's a very important topic, and it concerns people's pocketbooks and the amount of money they have and what they have to spend on their monthly bills. So, good idea to cover it, David.
Perfect. Okay, so Steve Jennings will be our first, or not in our first, but our guest in the studio. And we have our very, very special guest on the phone. I'm actually very excited. Many in the community, many in the state know our guest with the Arizona Corporation Commission, and her name is none other than Lea Marquez Peterson. We are going to be learning a lot about Lea, but she is could we say the newest, Steve, the newest commissioner?
I believe so.
I believe so.
At this point.
Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson, thank you so very much for making time and joining us over the phone. Welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you, David, for having me, and good to hear your voice, Steve.
Perfect. So I understand that. So do you live in Tucson? Do you live in Phoenix? Both? Where are you now?
That's a good question. No, I live in Tucson. I grew up here in southern Arizona, and I traveled to Phoenix for the job and opened a Corporation Commission office in Tucson also, so I could meet with folks in southern Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
But really making my way around the state. So it's been very busy 5 months that I've been serving.
Perfect. Commissioner, I'm going to refer to you as Commissioner Lea or Commissioner Marquez Peterson. Let's help me and help the audience understand about the Corporation Commission. But before we do, we would like to learn a little bit more about yourself. You are a Latina, and part of our platform at AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, is to celebrate Latino accomplishments. And I know you have some accomplishments to celebrate. So would you take a few minutes, maybe 5, 6, or as much as you want to tell us a little bit about your family, your career, anything that will help us to know more about you?
No, absolutely. And again, I'm honored to be on the show. A little bit about me. I grew up here in southern Arizona. A lot of my family is from the Clifton-Morenci mining community. I attended high school and college here in Tucson, attending the University of Arizona, and received my degrees in entrepreneurship and marketing. Entrepreneurship is interesting because that's what a lot of my family has done for generations, is own small businesses. I've followed in their footsteps and owned a chain of gas stations and convenience stores here in Tucson. I've also owned a business brokerage firm and a public affairs firm. But more recently, the last 10 years almost, I've been serving as the president of the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And people might find it interesting to know that we were recognized as the #1 Hispanic chamber in the United States in 2013. And we were not just in Tucson. We actually operated in Pima County, Santa Cruz, and Cochise County, and did a lot of work in Sonora also. So very proud of the work of our Hispanic Chamber and our board, and was appointed by Governor Ducey to the Arizona Corporation Commission just this spring.
This is unbelievable. Thank you so very much. Now, you did send me a text. Let me control my volume here. You did send me a text, and through text following, let me quote you actually. I am the first Hispanic woman to be in a statewide elected position in the history of Arizona. How does that feel?
That's incredible. You know, it's shocking that it took till 2019 for this to occur, considering the demographics of the state. We're more than 35% Latino here in Arizona, but very proud to hold that acknowledgement and plan to do certainly my community and the entire state well in my role at the Corporation Commission.
Yeah. Another question. How, and we're going to get into the details of what is the Arizona Corporation Commission. But before we do, how important is it? How significant is it that a Latina is now a commissioner? How does that, help our community?
I think it's important because, as you'll probably acknowledge next, is that most people don't know what the Arizona Corporation Commission does. And really, we are statewide. There are 5 of us that are elected or appointed to the seat, and we impact every single family and business in this entire state. So I think it's important that the Latino community be recognized and be a part of the Corporation Commission also. But certainly I'm there for everybody in Arizona, but I'm just very proud to represent my heritage as part of the Corporation Commission.
So having the proper perspective with our community, how does that help you provide the input to the Corporation Commission when it comes to issues?
That's a good question. I think anyone comes to a position like this with their perspective, right? Their life experiences. So my life experience is certainly, coming from kind of rural southern Arizona, small business ownership, a very close-knit family environment, and I'm Mexican-American. So I think all of that certainly influences my perceptions, my beliefs, and the direction perhaps I would vote on certain things. So I think it's important that we really have a commission that truly represents everyone in Arizona.
Your parents, your family, how do they feel about you occupying this very, very important position?
They're very proud of me. I mean, I will tell you, like probably most of my friends, when I was first appointed, it was, congratulations, Neha, what is that? So I have been explaining to people what the important role the Arizona Corporation Commission plays in our state and what I do on a daily basis. So they're very proud and realize that I'm traveling around the state, Eula, Superior Globe, Flagstaff, certainly to Phoenix every week, as well as spending a lot of time here in southern Arizona. So I think they're very excited for me, especially my husband and my children, too.
Of course. Now, I do have some pictures that I took from the website of the current commissioners. If I got it right, you are you are one of 2 women, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I can see there. So there's 5 commissioners right now?
That's right.
Yes.
And the second one, or the other lady, is Sandra Kennedy.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 of the 5 are women.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. We're going to take a short break, Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson, Steve Jennings, and we're going to start to explain to the community what is the Arizona Corporation Commission, who are they, what do they do, and how do they engage the community. So stay with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. The topic today, Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. We have Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson on the phone, and also Steve Jennings. Steve Jennings is the Advocacy Director for AARP in Arizona. Before we move into the the nitty-gritty of this topic. Steve, I'm sure you've met Commissioner Marquez Peterson.
Yes, and when she first was in the position, I asked if I could come in and see her, like I'm sure many of the other people who talk about issues in front of the commission, and she made time for us and sat down with her assistant there in her office up here in Phoenix, and we had a great conversation about, all the different issues that are important utility issues to older Arizonans.
Right. Commissioner Marquez Peterson, I see three words in this phrase: Arizona, that's an easy one, and then corporation, and then commission. So can you begin to kind of explain to us what is this? What is the Arizona Corporation Commission?
The bulk of the work that we do, if you can hear me, is utility regulation. So we regulate the private and investor-owned utilities in the state. So that's electric, water, gas, wastewater. Certainly you've seen a lot of activity and conversation around APS and TEP if you're in southern Arizona. We also, though, with that corporation word in the middle of our name, we handle all the business incorporations for the state. So as you've heard Governor Ducey explain, it's so important that we make it easy to do business and to start businesses in Arizona. So we play an important role in helping businesses get incorporated. We also handle securities fraud, companies or people that come to Arizona that sell investments that might be fraudulent, targeting older Arizonans is something that we also get involved in. And we also handle railroad crossings and pipeline safety. So it's very very broad, the issues that we talk about, and very complex. It's been an interesting adventure to learn so much about the utility industry and all the different work that the Corporation Commission does in our state.
Okay, so I just from what I'm learning, I suppose that the two big items, could we say, are corporations and how they incorporate with the government, how they become corporations formally and legally, and then the other one would be utilities. Are those the two biggest areas that perhaps people may know this commission more from or for?
Yeah, I think most people hear of us regarding utility regulation, and in other states, if people have moved here from other states, sometimes we're called the Public Utility Commission or the PUC. So people will know that that's what our Corporation Commission does. We're a little different, though, in that we were created or became an institute through our state constitution, which gives us a bit more power and kind of as a fourth arm of government than some of the other commissions across the country.
So are this there's five, and that's, I assume that's the composition of the commission. There's always five commissioners, I assume?
Yes, and we're elected to these seats.
And are you elected? Do you have to run for office, or are you appointed? How does that work?
Because the governor selected the gentleman that was in my seat, his name is Andy Tobin. He moved on to a director of administration position in the governor's staff. This seat was vacated, and the governor selected me and appointed me to this seat in May. So I have already launched a campaign to keep the seat, and I will be running for that in November of 2020.
Okay, so you do have to run for office then?
Yes, statewide.
Perfect. Now, Steve, let me ask you a question that I believe is super, super important. We are learning, I am learning, I believe the public is learning as well, that the Arizona Corporation Commission has several, some 3 or 4, I believe, categories of things that they do, from securities, safety, corporations, and then obviously utilities. Where does AARP come from in terms of engaging the Arizona Corporation Commission?
Well, we, generally get involved when utilities ask the commission for permission to raise their utility rates. When they do that, it makes people's electric or water or sewer bills go up, and we hear from our members about that. So, that's an important, people, older people, especially people that have moved out of the workforce and they're, the old, are on limited incomes mostly, and so every little increase it is a hit people take. So we do our best to make the case of what's the interest of older people in front of the commission, and the commission makes the tough judgments. The 5 commissioners are judges, so to speak, and they have to decide how much a utility should get to be a healthy company, because we all want to make sure that power's there when we throw the switch in the middle of the night. And then, not the position we take is we say seniors should pay a fair price for the electricity they use and not a penny more.
Now, has AARP traditionally engaged the Arizona Corporation Commission more on the utilities arena, not so much, say, on the securities, for example?
Very much so, although we bear witness and watch carefully the commission's work on securities, because, one of the main things they do is they try and catch these guys that are treating people unfairly or with fraud, misleading people, and put them out of business. And we sure encourage the commission to do that, to yank their licenses to sell this stuff in the state if it's no good. So we support the commission in their work on securities for sure.
Just for those of us who need a little bit more understanding on securities, what are we talking about when we talk about securities?
You might want to ask the commissioner.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Commissioner, can you help us understand a bit more? What are we talking about? And we will focus on today's show on utilities. We will focus on that because I believe that's extremely important, because I believe that's the area that touches the most people, I believe, out of the 4 categories that I can spot on the website at least. But in terms of securities, can you help us understand a little bit more? What is it, and how does the Arizona Corporation Commission gets involved with that?
No, certainly. We have a division, a securities division, that looks out for folks that come to our state who are selling investments. Think of it that way.
Okay.
Someone might have started a new company or have a new entity, and they are looking for folks to invest $1,000 with a guaranteed return of so much. And all of that, could potentially end up being fraudulent or trying to deceive people out of their dollars. And that's what our securities division looks out for and makes sure that we prosecute them. So unfortunately, we do have a couple of those that are on our agendas pretty much every month or every other month, where our securities division does a really good job ensuring that we're keeping Arizonans safe from fraudulent investments.
So in one word, as I am understanding this, investments, correct? When we talk about securities, we're talking about companies that offer investment products in our state.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So we will focus again on this show, particularly on the second and third segments, on utilities. I do have a question for you, Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson, from Alex Juarez on Facebook. He wants to ask you, he says, you came from the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce background, which is pro-business. What is the biggest difference now that you represent the state in the commission?
And that's a good question. It's probably the way in which we are making decisions. And as Steve mentioned, we're judges in many cases on so many of these different issues that come before us. We are in a role in which we are treated much like judges, that we cannot have conversations where there's not an open meeting setting, or we can't talk about open rate cases outside of the meeting that's held specifically for that purpose. And that's very different from how private industry or private business works, obviously. So I'm learning the ways in which the Corporation Commission operates with dockets, like online folders that contain all the different materials and research, and what I can and cannot talk to my fellow commissioners about before I'm on the dais. So I'd say the way in which we conduct the day-to-day operations of the commission is probably the biggest learning that I've been doing over the last several months.
Well, I just wanted to add to that a very important point Commissioner Marquez Peterson made, which is that, the commissioners are judges, and it's important to understand that. And just like a judge in a court case you see on Law & Order or something on TV, they can't go out in the hall, so to speak, and just talk to one side of the case. They're supposed to be impartial and only hear things from, in an open and transparent setting in public. And so It's difficult because we've had commissioners on AARP radio shows before, and people call in and say, well, what about this utility's trying to raise my rate? What do you think? And, of course, the commissioner has to say, well, I can't really discuss that right now. It's an open case. So it's a judicial function, and that's different than a state legislator. A legislator you can walk up to in a public meeting somewhere and discuss things, and they can talk to you about it. But a judge, a utilities commissioner, an Arizona corporation commissioner cannot. They can only do that in an open meeting, it's called.
Yeah. So we are going to go to our second break. But before we do, let me just do a little recap from what we have covered so far. So the Arizona Corporation Commission, they deal with, I see, four areas. The corporations, meaning when somebody wants to open up a business, for example, they have to go through them. And then the safety. And then they explain to us securities is another area, and that has to do with investments of companies that do investments in our state. And of course, last but not least, one of the most important ones, at least that people are touched with, utilities. So we will focus a bit more on the utilities aspect of the work of the Arizona Corporation Commission. Stay with us. We're going to take a short break. And also, we want to say again that we have Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson. Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson is the first Hispanic woman to be in a statewide elected position in the history of Arizona. This is quite an accomplishment, and I have to say it again. Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson is the first Hispanic woman to be in a statewide elected position in the history of Arizona. Congratulations once more, Commissioner.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Stay with us. We're going to take another short break, and we will be right back. The topic today, Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. The topic today is Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. We have two special guests. We have on the phone Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson, and we have in person in the studio Steve Jennings, he's AARP Arizona's Advocacy Director. And we will spend the next two segments talking about some very, very important topic, which is the topic of utilities. Again, based on my learning, this is the area that has to do with, and I'm going to read it so I get all the points. I have them right here. Utilities division is services related to electric, gas, telephone, wastewater, water, and consumer services. But I'm going to start talking about, let's tackle electricity. I suppose that if we tackle electricity, that'll give us an idea of how the other ones are handled. Is this fair enough, Commissioner, that the way one is handled pretty much applies to the other services, or each service is different?
I'd say that each service is different, and actually what I think most people are most surprised about is that there are 1,500 water companies in the state of Arizona. Most of them are operated by their municipality, their cities or counties, and we regulate some 300 of them that are privately owned. But I think water very different from electricity, different from telecommunications, and so on. But electricity is certainly a great place to start.
Can you repeat that again? How many water companies we have in Arizona?
1,500.
Huh. That I did not know.
Very large. I've toured so many of them. So very large water companies. In fact, just this morning I was down in Sahuarita, which is south of Tucson, touring the Sahuarita Water Company that's part of Rancho Sahuarita, that development, to very small little mom-and-pop water companies throughout our state, and how they are managed and how they handle the infrastructure investment is very different in different parts of the state based on their size. So I have found that particularly interesting to study.
Now, for my understanding, so these smaller water companies, and I know we're not going to focus on water, are they linked to a bigger entity?
In most cases, no. They are, in many cases, developers that developed housing developments, and they also dug the well and put the infrastructure in and created their own water company. Some companies manage 20 homes. Some manage 200 or 1,000 homes. I mean, it's just a real variety around the state. So I've been working to meet with small water companies in all different corners of the state so I can best understand what we might be able to do to make them more efficiently run.
Got it. Okay, so now let's go back to the nitty-gritty. I know that obviously I have electricity at home, and from time to time we hear of raises, right? They're going to raise our bills. They're going to raise our electricity. Can both of you tell the public how these raises are done? Now, what is the process? Do the companies, or the company just says, I'm going to do it? Does the government says, no, you can't? I mean, I understand it's a very complex process to come to increase the cost of electricity. Can we start perhaps with you, Commissioner, and then if Steve can, kind of between the two of you, help the public understand because I believe that's in the end what people care about. How are prices set for us users of electricity in Arizona?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying that as a commissioner, the priority for me is that we have safe, reliable, and affordable services. That's what everybody wants. As you mentioned earlier, when you flip the switch, you want to make sure the electricity turns on, or you turn the knob and water is coming out of the tap that's clean and safe for your family. So as commissioners, we balance that whole discussion around rate increases with the investment that's made in the infrastructure and in testing to make sure the water quality is up to par and that we've got the investment in place that's needed with the affordability of the rates. It is a complex process that Steve's been around probably much longer than I have, where they file a rate case and lots of financial data and capital investment structure analysis goes into the rate case. And the staff at the Arizona Corporation Commission assesses it over several months and audits it and tours and makes sure that those investments were made historically and looks at even competitive areas related to what historically has been charged and what % increase ratepayers will see. And then they bring a recommendation forward to our commission that we sometimes take quite a bit of time studying and then ultimately voting and determining or changing or modifying the rate increase.
So, Steve, if I get mad or the families get mad for the raises, I guess it's not as simple as it doesn't have a simple answer. Can you add to what the commissioner just said in terms of the process that it takes to come to, approve? I mean, is there an approval process here that has to take place, or does the company just says, I want an increase? Why do they have to check? Why couldn't they just do it, increase the prices?
Well, utilities are monopolies, and we can use Arizona Public Service as an example. If you live in the service area of APS, then they are the only ones you can get your electricity from, and because they're monopolies, they're regulated by the government. The framers of our state constitution set that up, and so that people are protected from the excesses of monopolies. If they're the only one you can get your power from, they can pretty much, charge whatever they want unless they're regulated. So, yes, a utility has to get permission from the Corporation Commission. The 5 commissioners have to vote to allow them to raise their rates. And, just like with a family, costs go up over time, and utilities have higher costs over time and need to raise their rates. But the question is how much, and as Commissioner Peterson was saying, affordability is a central concept. Power has to be reliable so that it's there, and it has to be affordable. Now, the companies, need to be economically viable companies. They need to be making money. They need to be able to sell debt on the markets so that they can raise money. Putting in new power lines. Phoenix, for example, is growing very rapidly. And they need to be able to raise money to finance improvements. And if they're economically healthy, they pay a lower interest rate to get money than if they're not so. So the Corporation Commission makes those tough decisions when they ask for a rate case. There's going to be one in the near future with Arizona Public Service, and seek permission to raise their rates. And there's a whole process. The first part of it is determining how much money the company should get. Mm-hmm. And then when that's determined, the second part of it is who's going to pay that cost. There's three types of, in a large sense, utility rates. There's industrial, there's commercial, and then there's residential. And so which of those three pays what portion of the increase and how much is what we go in front of the commission and debate back and forth, and they make their judgment call.
So each part, basically, once they approve that, yes, they need an increase, then they have to decide which one of these three will pay for it. I assume in most cases a little bit for everyone.
What portion of it? Yeah, right. And the different parts of it have different leverage. Some of the big industrial users like mines have actually been able to build their own power generation. So if you raise their rates too much, they say, well, we'll just make our own power. And the commercial, like the governor was saying, we want to be able to have jobs and, for the families. And so you don't want to overly burden the commercial.
Right.
But then, a lot of the residential are struggling families or seniors on fixed income. So these are tough decisions the commissioners make. And, we go at them from all sides and often say opposite things from each other. And they got to be tough. And I think Commissioner Marquez Peterson and the other four are all tough and make the tough decisions.
Yeah. Commissioner Marquez Peterson, I know that you haven't been at this as a commissioner for a long time, but in the time that you have you gotten opportunities to be in this discussions, scenarios where you are having to decide cases?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from the very get-go, and Steve can probably tell you more details, I stepped in and they were almost mid-sentence on some of these rate cases and different issues that they'd been working on, in some cases, for decades. And so I got up to speed as quickly as I could. I have a great staff, a great team around me, so they brought me the history and where we were in the discussion, and so I could think through each of the cases and decide what direction I wanted to go. But absolutely, I've had, I don't even know how many cases in front of us just since May. It's been very active.
So from your perspective, the perspective of the Arizona Corporation Commission, what are you looking for or at in terms of when a case is put before you? I'm sure, so basically I understand that the raises cannot happen every year. How often can a raise happen?
I mean, they can come in as requested. I think they're more typically 3 to 5 years. I do like to see, in just my short experience, capital investment or maintenance and operations that have been done on the equipment to ensure that it's, again, safe and reliable. It's been done consistently over time. So not good to see a utility come in and they haven't had a rate case in 20 years, right? That's not good. So we like to see consistent operations and maintenance so that you have more gradual rate increases and you don't have any family or business really experiencing some kind of rate shock. So I think we also want to make sure that as they spend money, they're spending it on the right things, that these are capital investments or operational expenses that they're having that would be approved by the commission, and it's not something frivolous and shouldn't be on the backs of ratepayers. So there are lots of financial analysis that we do in these rate cases.
So are these reports, when you talk about a rate case, are they like huge reports that these companies are asked to provide, and then the commissioners have to literally read them and know if there's a justification to raise the prices?
Yes, and actually it's all open. So if listeners want to look at some of these dockets, these online folders, they can go to azcc.org airc.gov, and you can look at any of the utility companies that we regulate. But we've got a very strong staff at the Arizona Corporation Commission. They're going through, let's say, the 800 to 1,000 pages of a rate filing that might come in, and then there might be another 500 to 1,000 pages of additional documents and letters sent to us by concerned citizens or advocacy groups. And so they're vetting through all of that prior to making a recommendation to us. There's also administrative law judges that are having hearings throughout this process so that they can hear from folks. And so we often weigh in during the hearings.
Right. Steve, we have about literally 45 seconds. We can go just over just a little bit, but you obviously are a lobbyist, and AARP lobbies or advocates.
That's right. I'm a registered lobbyist at the Corporation Commission.
So from the perspective of lobbyists, who lobbies the commissioners and for what?
Well, there's all sorts of people that go in front of the commission representing virtually every interest that uses utilities. And we also bring in volunteers and have them talk about what it's like to, live on a fixed income and try and afford rate increases. So there's all sorts of people on there that show up at the hearings. The hearings are broadcast on television, and all the documents are available on the web, like the commissioner was telling people. They can see them all and be involved in the process. Public participation is encouraged.
I kind of sense that it's a very complex process. You mentioned industry, commercial, and residential. May I assume that the lobbyists belong to these kinds of groups?
That's right. Sure, they're all there. And it's a little intimidating, but it really shouldn't be because, you're the guy paying the bills and as a residential customer, and you shouldn't get intimidated by it. Lea went over it quickly, but the commission staff is quite expert. There's a number of them that go through these, what a company makes is a request, and they go through that with a fine-tooth comb, including all the money in it. There's also another office that represents residential ratepayers called the Residential Utilities Commission, and it appears at these and voices the residential point of view, too.
Is that RUCO?
That's RUCO, and it's funded through your utility bills, not so much through the legislative appropriation.
Yeah. Let's take our last break. You are listening to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. The topic today is Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. I believe we are offering very, very good information, much needed. It's not a simple issue, but I believe we have two experts who are helping us to understand a little bit better with the goal of not just understanding these things, but for us to get involved. Stay with us. We'll take our last break. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Again, we are addressing the Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. We have on the phone commissioner. Wow, commissioner. We have a Latina commissioner, and this is very important. I cannot stress it enough. We have a Latina commissioner at the Arizona Corporation Commission. It's very, very important that we do the Arizona Corporation Commission, the who, the what, and the how. And we also have Steve Jennings. Steve Jennings, he's been with ARP for 20-plus years. Have you been handling utilities for more than 20 years, Steve?
That's a good guess, yeah. I'd say
guess.
that I have been
that's
around
a lot
20
of years
of that.
You've seen a lot.
I've been there 28 years with AARP.
So just personally, or if you can even do it personally or as an employee of ARP, what is the most difficult thing that you witness or that you feel as you go through this process of a rate case?
The most difficult part is really making the case for seniors to the commissioners themselves. I mean, several of the commissioners are seniors themselves. But, what can you say? You go up and you say, please don't raise the rates because a lot of people can't afford it. And, that message gets old. We tell other older Arizonans to come in and say what the impact is like on them because, they've heard it from me before. But one of the things I say is that, for 25% of the people that get Social Security, it is their only source of income, 25% of them. And the average Social Security check in Arizona, according to Social Security, is $1,411 in 2019. $1,411 for 25% of the people on Social Security. This year, the COLA, the cost of living increase, was 1.7%. I think that works out to an increase over a year of about $24 a month. So when utilities come in and say, we want to raise rates it can be a big chunk of that, of your little bit of COLA increase for that year. If you're that 25%, 50% of the people on Social Security, the Social Security check is the biggest chunk of their income.
Wow.
So, it's a serious business, but it's a serious business that the utilities need money too. So we do the best at trying to impress on the commissioners, that a lot of seniors don't have a lot of money, and then let them make the tough calls that they're in office to make. And if the voters don't like it, they can, at the next election, change things.
So basically, the idea is of this process is the companies are going to come and show or try to show the commissioners that they need more money because of X, Y, and Z reasons.
Yes.
And then the commissioners are going to have to see the arguments and the reasons, and then they also have to contemplate who is it going to hurt and who is going to pay for this. Commissioner Marquez Peterson, there was an issue with APS that made the news. Can you tell us, as much as you are allowed to explain what was that all about?
Certainly. Right about when I was appointed by Governor Ducey to the commission, we learned of the passing of a woman who is from the Sun City area about a year ago. Her electricity had been shut off or disconnected, and she had passed away. And her family had been very upset and called the commission, and we learned and the details and so on that came about from that. It's a very horrible, horrible situation, and I feel so badly for her family and her friends. The commission addressed it immediately, and we put in place an emergency moratorium, which meant that electricity and utilities could not be shut off over the very hot summer, all the way actually to October 15th. So the moratorium just recently ended. As a commission, what we are working with now is what will the permanent disconnect policies be? How can we ensure better customer service at the utilities that we regulate? And we want to ensure this never happens again, that someone's life is impacted, a life and death situation when you don't have air conditioning per se in the very, very hot summer. So we're having workshops and meetings that folks can weigh in on or come down to the commission to give us their opinion. We had one about a month ago on permanent disconnect rules, and I've heard from folks throughout the state with their opinions on this.
Got it. Steve, the moratorium, can you define a little bit more what that is?
Well, it was the commission told the utilities, all of them, that from, I believe it was June 1 to October 15th, that if somebody didn't pay their bill or pay their bill in whole, that they couldn't be terminated. They couldn't be shut off for that reason during the extreme, heat of summer, but that they would still owe the money for the electricity or the water or the sewer that they used over that period, the gas. And so, that ended October 15th, which is, about 2 weeks ago. And now the utilities are giving people, under the direction of the commission, 4 months to pay off what the bill that they ran up over the summer. And the commission had the utilities come in and say how they would attempt to collect that arrearage, it's called. Arrearage is what you owe that you ran up. And to make sure that was done in as fair a possible a manner. And, of course, the various interests are in there. Turning off people's electricity is one way to get people to pay their bills, is what the utilities say. And the commission said give them 4 months to pay off the money they ran up over the summer, and that takes them into the cool months where the bills shouldn't be so big. We believe at ARP people should have longer, like 12 months, to pay off that amount, and we're voicing that to the commission. The commission is considering what should be the permanent moratorium policy, and that'll get worked out in the coming months.
Okay, so basically folks have to pay that right now as it stands, 4 months to pay their debt. If not, their services are cut off.
And their existing bill, the existing bill that they run up at that month, and 1/4 of their the way
so they
APS
divide
is doing
what
it
they owe in 4 parts, and they add it to the
4
bill.
months bills. And if they get behind, my understanding is if they get behind on any of those bills, they can be cut off. But if they adhere to the repayment plan, then they can't be, according to the Commission's directive.
I also heard that they do not have to let them know in person. If they're going to get their services cut off, they basically just do it, correct?
I'm not sure about that. I think the different utilities have different policies. Remember that when they go in for a rate case or when they're trying to get a policy through the Commission, the staff of the Commission looks at it quite closely and makes a recommendation, which is then an administrative law judge, as Commissioner Marquez Peterson mentioned, has a hearing that the public can come into and all the lobbyists and the interests can come into and makes a recommendation for the Commission's consideration. And that process is underway on this.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'll mention that as we spoke about the emergency moratorium and put that in place, we found that there was no standardization. Utilities across the state handled this differently. Some made phone calls, some had robocalls, some sent 3 emails before you were cut off.
I see.
Some visited you. It was a total variety, and I know my office, we actually asked every utility company, whether we regulated you or not, to send into my office your disconnection policy so we could see if there were best practices or things that we should be doing. And we're providing that information into the discussion on the permanent disconnect policies. But I think we need to do a better job of letting people know what the social service agencies have in terms of support, as well as communicating to people when they are in arrears or are facing a disconnect.
Commissioner Marquez Peterson, we are about time that we have to go off the air, but let me just ask you one more question. It has to be a tough decision for the commissioners when they have to put on the balance the industry, the corporation, the corporations,
the commercial,
the commercial companies, and then
the residential.
People, the residential. Just from the standpoint of you being there, I mean, how's that process? I mean, I'm sure that you there's numbers, there are facts, but then there are people's lives, people's needs. How's that process for you as a commissioner?
Yeah, I think of it as it's so interconnected. Whether I know a majority of probably the AARP members are in Phoenix or Tucson in urban communities, but so many live in rural communities. And we need that commercial and that industrial industry in order to have jobs, to create a tax base so that people can live there and we can have roads and clean water and so on. So it really is interconnected. I don't think of it as pitting one against the other when we go through these rate cases. We really do need a balance, and that's the approach that I've been taking in so many of these hard-to-decide decisions.
Thank you so very much, Commissioner Lea Marquez Peterson, for joining over the phone. We just have a few more seconds. I want to just thank you again, and we'll have you again, hopefully in person in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
Perfect. And Steve Jennings, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Great to be here.
The website, I believe, if I remember right, is azcc.gov, right?
For the Corporation Commission.
Right,
yes.
for the Corporation Commission, azcc.gov. Thank you. This is all the time we have for now. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.